yo. So this is part 2 of the video. Where I left off was fucking telemarketers. Anyways, um, the reactor. Like, in other words, that the heart-shaped field, that little part is where I suspect the weak spot is on these ships. Maybe they don't have lightning where they come from. Is what I'm assuming. So they really didn't factor in for this fucking crazy shit, or maybe they control their weather. Um, but lightning is an issue for them. So again, what I think that happens is the lightning bolt hits the top of the ship, gets funneled into the reactor. The reactor has a failsafe because, again, we are talking about antimatter matter conversion. So in order to keep that electricity from causing all the antimatter to go off, it shuts off, and that's why they just fucking drop right out of the fucking sky. In space, let's say there's an overload like this, the reactor would activate, it would go ahead and reboot, and then just continue. Remember, it's almost inertial, or maybe if they're in warp field, they just stop, the reactor resets itself, and they continue. But in atmosphere, they're kind of fucked. Like, another thing that I noticed is they have problems, like, maneuvering. I mean, their maneuvers are more all over the fucking place. I think that they have problems, or at least their method of propulsion has issues traveling short distances. Like in atmosphere, they have problems, and I think that that's an advantage for us, because of the simple fact that if they can't maneuver precisely and can only zap from fucking place to place, maybe even again, if we created an aircraft with a directed energy weapon, let's say a drone, let's say you made you ever seen these 64 propeller drones? They're fast as shit, and they sound like little turbines just zooming around. I would create a exact copy of that shit, just big enough to store a laser that can be aimed and stuff on some kind of gimbal, and have that laser just have maybe one shot, maybe just 1 or 2, 3 shots of just fucking gigawatts or terawatts of electrical energy. Again, maybe have the drone have smaller drones that are just fucking capacitors, flying capacitors. Like, in other words, instead of a warhead, these things would have an electrical charge as their warhead. Let somebody else fucking figure out how that would work. But again, in the terawatt range, just a fucking zap. And I think that something like that could be able to chase a UFO down using an AI or some kind of algorithm to, say, okay, it just disappeared, and capture the movement. So it's like, okay, we know that they're going in that direction, and at some point they're going to come back, or like to find the trajectory of how they're moving. Like, I think that we need to study their movement, and I think that if we study their movement, we can predict which direction they will be traveling in. I also would recommend LiDAR, because again, if you shine a laser, here's what I would recommend. If you took a laser with a diffuser, you know how they have those little laser lights that just, you project it onto a tree and you see hundreds of, it looks like almost like fireflies all over the tree with green laser lights. So imagine if you took something like that, let's say several of them, and you projected it on that tree, but you put it on a gimbal and rotated it super fucking fast. You'd have basically a full coverage of just laser light. And I think that the warp field will give itself away in which direction it's going to go. So I think that if you're scanning it with an array like that, and you're able to see the warp field itself, because again, the light will be bent by this warp field, so you'll be able to see it almost undulating around the ship, and the second that the warp begins to change direction, you know that it's going to move in a certain direction. So that's how I would detect them. I would use an infrared laser, just because of the simple fact that they do show up pretty well on infrared. So that is another thing that's kind of interesting. So they are giving off heat, which kind of makes sense. Radar doesn't seem to work as well, so maybe radar is susceptible to being bent around the warp field, but for some reason, infrared works. So I would go with an infrared laser scanning array with like I said, the diffusers, and as it spins, it's going to create almost a straight line. So you'd have these lines of just, and wherever the lines would distort, would show you the field. And using a really high-end computer, you can calculate where the ship would be traveling and which direction it's going to be going next based on that. And then release your drones. The drones would coordinate around the flying saucer, and then, you know, maybe use a good old-fashioned shape charge, or again, maybe some kind of capacitor explosion that just creates a huge, massive electrical shock, and aim for the top of the ship. So again, that's how I would fight them, if I had to, because again, they are susceptible to that. Another thing that I find interesting based on Lazar's account is that their technology hasn't changed very much. So their technology is badass, but there's not a lot of innovation there. They're still using the same 115. They're still using the same method of technology, just in different crafts and stuff. So again, it's just it's interesting that, like I said, they're dependent on this 151. This is a staple. This is like oil is to us, 151 is to them. So it's extremely important for their technology, for their empire, for whatever the fuck you want to call it. Maybe even their weapons are based on this stuff. Maybe they do have photon torpedoes, nukes that, antimatter weapons that can nuke a city and not leave any radiation behind. So, also a scary thought. But again, their technology is, I don't think, as advanced as we think it is. They might be 100,000 years, but I think we're catching up super fucking fast. Where was I going with this? Sorry, I'm kind of a little high, so pardon my lapse in concentration. Fighting them. So again, I think that LiDAR would pick them up in an infrared spectrum. I think that what we need to do is really, if we're going to study these things, let's fucking study these things. I'd start with a life-size drone, with the 4 propellers, electrically powered, and as soon as there's a UFO, UAP, whatever you want to call it, I call it a UFO, fuck it. And Pluto's a planet, fuck you. Send these things up, scan them. I mean, we need something that will scan them in every spectrum of laser light, scan them in every type of radar. We need microwave, we need everything that we possibly can, and also to pick up every emission this thing makes. I would want to hear every radio emission, every light emission, every spectrum of light, study the shit out of these things. Even their movement, Their movement is so important because, again, I think that we can create algorithm, even though they're fast as shit, I think we could create an algorithm that would predict where the ship would come out, and then be able to coordinate that between, let's say, drone aircraft, which drone aircraft is nice because you don't have to worry about the G-forces. That's where our advantage is, drones. If you put a pilot in there, there's no way a aircraft even a life-size drone that can do all these crazy maneuvers, almost like they can, would not be able to handle the stress of the G-forces. So I think drones are our advantage. I think drones are the way we can possibly fight back, assuming they don't throw rocks at us. But if it had to go one-on-one, I think that their technology is not so scary. I think that we're not too far away, and I think that if with careful design and careful study of these things, I think that we could fight them here on Earth. Like, keep an invasion force. The problem again is if they throw a rock at us, we're fucked. So, take it for a grain of salt. But again, a drone fighter, let's say, with a connection that wouldn't be able to be broken, because they could also, sever the connection between the drone and the drone operator. So maybe also with a certain amount of AI built into it, so it would follow, but if it breaks, then it knows what its orders are. Shoot this shit down. And I think that would be able to maneuver with the UFO when it's, just doing its regular maneuvers, just be able to, like, go around it and shit, like, for us to show off for a while. For us to fucking send them a message. Like, hey, fuckers, we're not too far away from you. So, the other thing, again, I would have on that is every array of sensors that you can imagine. And why not send a swarm? A swarm up. A UFO is spotted. We know it's there. It's doing all kinds of crazy shit. Send a swarm of these specialized drones. Again, with AI built into it, so if the connections are severed, the thing will continue with its mission to analyze and study. And if you had several of them surrounding a UFO, you could get all this LiDAR information in every direction and actually, again, be able to study. I mean, with LiDAR, you should be able to tell, like, every single little bump on the, on the surface of the ship, the shape of the ship, what the ship is doing, where the heat emissions, where the energy emissions are coming from. You'd need to know all this shit, to be able to have an effective strategy of fighting them. I think that the fact that we have conventional weapons that are not electrically powered is worrisome to them because, again, any invasion force would have to. But again, I don't see the level of imagination that we have. Like, if I was to do this, I would just send out, like, what was that movie with Keanu Reeves, The Day the Earth Stood Still? Just like little micro nano things that would just consume everything. That's what our minds are capable of. I don't think theirs are. I don't think that they, like, if we got AI and AI designed a nano attack drone that would just fucking, like the one in the movie, AI could design that. AI could build that. AI could build all the logistical, what materials are needed, what other things need to be created before. The AI could do all that shit. What would take us 1,000 years to do, AI could do in a matter of minutes, at worst. So I think that AI is what probably scares them, which scares us. And I think that we're going to jump really, really far. Now, here's one of the things that Lazar said that was interesting. We don't have 151. No, not 151. 115. I'm an alcoholic. I'm sorry. Ex-alcoholic. But, shit. My battery's running out. So 115 is their weak spot. I think that we are going to get to their level of technology without 115. I think that what they did was they mined all the 115 here on Earth and kind of broke our legs and now are looking to see what we do. And we're finding ways around this 115 issue and creating technologies that they've never fucking thought of. We will create warp drives without 115, which probably is going to freak them the fuck out because this thing is a staple of their technology. If we create a warp capable ship without 115, then we have just leapfrogged them in technology, and it's right around the corner. It's going to happen. Not to mention, with our level of creativeness, the weapons that we could come out with, the technologies that we could come out with, and that's us. Us with AI, it would be immense. It would be just leapfrogging, humans and AI both just evolving together into, this incredible thing, that they are not capable of. Again, I look at their technology and I can understand it. I can wrap my head around it. Even Lazar's explanations, we're not cavemen anymore. You know what I mean? We can understand how their shit works. So again, that's my take on the whole UFO phenomenon, UAP phenomenon. I think we're in for a fight. I think that the fact that we have guns is good because you can't jam a gun. With an electromagnetic pulse, it's still going to fire. So, again, I don't think that it's a good intention. It can't be. Why would they, what, to make us join a federation or something, they would have already come down. They would have already come down. They would have already, unless they've got some kind of agreement with our government. The government has to know more than what it's talking about. And then it starts to get really freaky when you start saying, okay, the government admitted these things exist, and we have stories that they exist, and they can say, no, they don't exist. And we have stories of abductions. I'm assuming that the abductions are true too, which means, what are they trying to do with us? Are they trying to evolve us? I mean, are we an experiment that they are reaping from? Like they said, let's fuck with these monkeys. We see it in science fiction all the time. A scientist will bring a dinosaur back, the dinosaur eats the scientist. Frankenstein's monster. I think we are Frankenstein's monster. I think they fucked with us, and now we have become this super virus that they weren't fucking expecting, that they can't fucking stop. This thing that they fucked with us a little bit, thinking, well, let's just mess with them a little, and it's like we've turned it into something that they are literally now scared of. And eventually, we are like AI for them. Like, we are the thing that will eventually, and we're so fucking aggressive too. I mean, look at what we do to each other. Look at the things that are being done in Ukraine. That's us. That's humans, on both sides. I don't think they would want to go to war with a civilization as advanced as them with that kind of brutality and mentality. So I think that something big is going to come. I think that it's not going to be good. I think the whole world is going to have to get used to something. I think that just the opposite of you, Elon Musk. I think that we need to develop AI as fucking fast as humanly possible. I think that AI and us will kind of, enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I think AI and humanity are destined to grow together and become the future. Definitely defend the planet. I mean, AI knows that if these things come and they wipe us out, we're fucked. So it would understand that its greatest enemy is not us, it's that. So I think that I think we're still fucked. But again, I think that we need to study the thing. If we're going to study them, designated planes specialized for UFO study. Everything, magnetometer, spectrometer, every fucking piece of equipment, even, let's say, a cesium clock. The thing takes off and there's two cesium clocks to see if it suffers any dilation, being close to the craft. Just fit everything that we possibly can. And instead of, like I said, with wings and stuff like that, no, let's just turn it into a giant drone, with some AI control, so that if the link is severed, and send up a whole swarm of these, let's say C-30 sized, four-rotor drones with electrical motors, have them be able to maneuver like crazy, like if one of these things takes off, it would just, a C-130 sized four-rotor drone with electrical engines, for it to just take off and just be, instead of like taxiing and shit, just ridiculous G-forces, maneuverability. Let's match these motherfuckers, because we can. We can build things like that. Again, human passengers are not going to work, but put it with some kind of automatic control, AI, as well as, a link. And if the link is severed, the thing still knows what its mission is and what it needs to do, which is study the UFO. And I think that if we could do that, then we're a couple of steps ahead, and it's time that we send them a message. Hey, assholes, we know you're here, and we don't want you here, So I think that if you had, again, a design for a C-130 sized four-rotor drone that would work like the little racing drones, just super, just as fast as they are, just as maneuverable as they are, with an AI, a swarm of these, with like I said, a LiDAR system that just fucking lights everything up in infrared. These things will glow in the infrared, or we start shooting things at it to see what works best to detect them. And again, just scan the shit out of it from different angles to get as much information as we can, and also to send them a message for once. Hey, fuckers, we know you're here, and we don't want you here. We're gonna study you. We're gonna fucking annoy you. We're gonna bother you. You know. So those are my thoughts on the UAP, UFO phenomena. I wish I could study it. I wish I could to actually see one, set up arrays of lasers and all kinds of magnetic, just study the shit out of it, get as much information. If we have them, then also, we know of a few things about their technology. Do we have a comparable thing? Did we already leapfrog them? Did we create a, matter-antimatter reactor without the use of 115? So many questions. And again, I think we're on the verge of a technological revolution with AI. I think AI is not going to be bad because it's going to recognize them more of a threat than we are. And I think that we need to just get that ball rolling a little bit faster, because AI is the only thing that would probably save us from an invasion. And yeah, so those are my thoughts. A little high and shit, so